Good afternoon, everyone. I see we have a couple dozen people here already, and if a few more people might be coming in over the next few minutes. So we won't get started too fast, but I would like to welcome everyone to the virtual and to the 6th annual Texas Conference on Introductory History Courses. We're happy today to be able to hear from Ann Hyde of University of Oklahoma. And before we turn it over to her, I just wanted to say a couple words. My name is Julia Brookins. I'm Special Projects Coordinator with the American Historical Association. And I've been organizing this conference over a number of years with a lot of help, especially volunteer help. And thank you to everyone who's been involved in past years. And I hope to meet more of you again in person, starting next year, I guess. So one of the main goals of this conference is to help build a community of practice among history faculty at all levels, but especially among people who instruct introductory college level history courses in the state of Texas. Not exclusively, but especially. So we have had one webinar on Monday for those of you who are able to make it. We heard from the commissioner of the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, Harrison Keller, and that recording will be available online by next week. And today we're hearing from Ann Hyde. Next week we will be holding 6 course topic-based small group conversations on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So 2 each day. And I encourage you, if you haven't already done so, to sign up for any of those that are of interest to you. Yeah, we're hoping that we can also share resources. So there will be a Google Drive folder associated with each of those course discussions. And we encourage you, if you can, to upload your syllabus if you're comfortable with that, or readings, remote resources that you've been using that you recommend, assignments that you use if you're comfortable sharing those. So we really would like to get people sharing information and talking about their practices in the classroom. So I would like to introduce Ann Hyde. She is a professor of history at the University of Oklahoma and the editor of the Western Historical Quarterly. She has been involved with the AHA for many years now. She was on the teaching division of the AHA Council and was the faculty chair of the AHA Tuning Project beginning in 2011. She's also been involved in a lot of other history teaching and learning initiatives with and beyond the AHA. And her book, Empires, Nations, and Families, won the 2011 Bancroft Prize. She is an excellent, a model citizen even, a pillar of our community of historians, and I'm very happy that we can hear from her today. So.
Hi, Julia. Thank you so much for doing that. So again, thanks to the AHA for hosting this and to Julia for inviting me. I'm a little nervous. It's been a while since I've given an actual talk. So, it's weird doing it in this space where there isn't an audience and you don't get any feedback and no one laughs at your gentle humor. So it's a funny situation. I was very interested in what Commissioner Keller had to say on Monday, because I'm teaching in person and teaching the US survey just this minute in Oklahoma. So I want to talk to you about kind of what I'm thinking about the survey course right now. And so my plan is to talk with some slides for about 20 minutes-ish, and then see if people have questions about my big pitch. And then I'm going to go very small and talk about exactly what I'm doing in my classroom right now. And then I can show you some more stuff, and then we can have some more questions at the end. And I think Julia will be monitoring the chat and the questions as we do this. So I'm going to get my face off the screen, sort of, and get my screen up here. Okay. We're all getting practice at doing these new things. So I do want to plant some seeds of doubt here and also to channel Eeyore. I also want to take Commissioner Keller's words about, thinking through what the value of history is and to make a value proposition for history. And make a case for this required course that appears in a whole bunch of formats in our campuses. So we're in a funny situation for sure. I don't even know how to describe sort of where we are at this particular moment. So these are here's what's happening. So we're in the midst of a pandemic. No one wants to listen to us. We've got really urgent demands around racial justice, and all kinds of people are paying attention to what's happening in the streets. So I think that affects the US survey in different kinds of ways, just again, part of this moment. Then we have this other sort of longer term issue, which we have, booming enrollment in intro courses because we require students to take it. But we still, face the problem of people not majoring in history. So again, we're back to this value issue. How do we explain the value of a history course to students, parents, or legislators? So I think that's important to think through all that. And the other issue that we're facing right now, and again, Commissioner Keller talked about this really specifically, is we lose students literally when we go online. They lose motivation, support, a safe place to learn, the resources and structure that come with the in-person piece. And students who sign up to take an online course, it's one thing, but if they're expecting the in-person, it's difficult. And when they fail because they just can't do it, they can't manage the technology, they don't have the right access, they don't come back. So one of the things, and I'm still sad over some students I know I lost last spring that I could have helped over the hump if we'd been in person. So this is important. If we fail to get students engaged, and even in this particular course, it's a huge loss. And at this moment, I think it feels a little dire. So, these are some pictures of sort of what's going on now. So it is a little bit of a horror show as we try to manage all this. And I'm using the University of Oklahoma here as an example, but I think you all probably have similar things on your campuses. For example, whoops, let me get back to where I thought I was. Okay, I don't quite get how the pointer works. Okay, so these are our instructions for OU. So game day has now ousted faculty in terms of what's the most important thing. But some people are teaching in person, we're online, we're doing hybrid things. We get confusing, conflicting instructions about how to manage technology, and no one is there to help us. Some people are, having this sort of yearbook picture life with Zoom screens and tiny faces. I put a picture up there of I have a 40-person survey class, and I'm teaching in this 300-person room. So everyone looks like sad little birds floating in this sea, and that's me wearing my mask. So it's, quite a show that we're managing here. So, to quote Eeyore, it could be worse. And it did get worse. The situation in classrooms, university, and cultural politics that we all share, this is serious business. And, one of the things that's happened, just for example, is wearing masks is political instead of what you're supposed to do as a good citizen in your community. So, how did this actually happen? here's the OU football team marching in solidarity, wearing their masks. And this is on every campus, but it's the OU student section not wearing their masks this weekend. So, you know, we need to understand this. So none of this is our fault. I don't think it's our students' fault. But if we don't figure out how we got here, which actually is a historical question, that's on us. And that's, again, part of this value proposition of history. How do we end up in this place with this political issue around masks, which is surprising. Okay, so I'm going to make a pitch for rethinking the required course model. And again, to kind of channel Eeyore, you know, maybe this isn't a good idea, but we'll see. There are three big problems attached to all this. So, you know, why are we're in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of this contested election? What does this single introductory course mean? Who knows? So I think the course has several problems attached to it, and everyone knows this. Legislatures and campus leaders pay attention to the course because it's one of these requirements. Because it's required, students come in assuming they're going to hate it. And for a variety of reasons, a lot of people fail that course. And we've allowed it to become a coverage course where we introduce or survey the American story as sort of a civic duty. And we tell students and administrators that the course is about, you know, the basic facts of, or a general survey of, you know, some part of US history. Now, and that general survey thing is not that appealing or useful right now either, because you know, you can get the history of the entire planet on your phone, or the history of your aunt's big toe on your phone. So what we really need to do is to teach people to manage, assess, and winnow information, and to doubt that information. And a place to do this is in that intro survey. So, you know, this promise about this is what we're doing, we're going to teach people the basic facts. I think we can do way better than that. So, you know, what does that have to do with citizenship? So I'm going to push about reclaiming our survey class and thinking about what historians actually do, which I think is manage uncertainty. And there's certainly a lot of uncertainty in the world, but I think there always has been. So the place to teach people how to do that and to figure out what it is that we do is in the survey course. So that's where we are about this course. So I think a part of this is making, so we need to find some language to describe what we're doing, to talk about what our epistemology is, what is the center core of our discipline. So our core disciplinary beliefs, our epistemology, and we have a powerful one. And it's not just putting some stuff out there and seeing what can happen, but you know, sometimes that happens in class, but we actually do know what we're doing. We have a clear sense of all this. So, you know, we manage untrustworthy data, and we do it all the time. The record from the past is uneven, messy, so we manage that data. And these are the kinds of things we teach: judgment, tolerating uncertainty, considering multiple perspectives, expressing doubt, and managing uncertainty. So I think it's all there. But all of these things are part of, you know, having people lead better lives. It'll be central to developing better academic skills. And I also think it is a key to citizenship. And that's more important than the basic facts of American history. So that's where I think we are. And we've got passion and confidence about this set of intellectual moves that our, you know, unique historical way of knowing the world requires. Other scholars have called this an epistemic activity. And for historians, we know this. So this kind of describes it. We are imperfectly, tensely, unsurely certain that the narrative we're creating might be right. We doubt it is completely right. But I'm happy to be in that very uncertain state because I have a set of practices, intellectual moves, and ideas that help me navigate that unstable space. So we can describe what those are, but the next step is considering teaching practices and student work that generally reflect that. So, here's one way to think through this. So what's a, way to think about how do we know something is right or true? Now, the real answer is we don't trust our eyes. We question data. We operate with doubt. So, this is a Caravaggio painting of the Apostle Thomas, doubting. So this is doubting Thomas. And it's about challenging faith. So he wouldn't believe that the resurrected Jesus was back from the dead until he could actually see the actual bleeding wounds. And so you can see him poking into the wound there. That perspective is what we should be teaching. So there's so much untrustworthy data out there, and we should be sticking our fingers into it and poking around and seeing what's in it. Teaching students to doubt, test, reevaluate really is job one. So this isn't just about experts operating in a profession. This is about developing shared public values about evaluating evidence. So, and we have a huge opportunity to do that because we teach this required introductory course. Okay, so the good news about all this is if you get a whole bunch of history teachers in a room, there isn't much doubt about this stuff. The essential knowledge, skills, and habits of mind that we think are crucial for students of history. And these mesh pretty much with what we do in our professional practice. So these are a bunch of sort of lists of these things, and they're in different order, and they describe things in different ways. But, I put this in sort of columns so you could see, sort of what these look like. The 5 C's, which are really 7 C's because they've added care and contemplation at the bottom, are sort of the simplest, but the AHA tuning list is on one side, and then Lendl Calder, who I'll cite a little bit more, talks about it in this kind of language. But we agree about this stuff. We completely agree that this is what we're trying to teach students to do. We can disagree about what order you should teach those things, how you value, but we really are on the same page about all of this stuff. So, how this translates into, what we hope students will be able to do either as college majors or an introductory course or an AP class. So what should be, at this point, the most respected, most useful way to actually teach this? And I think that's where we don't agree so much. So we face a big challenge because we're still arguing about whether history is a set of facts or an epistemology. And, we should and could forgive the public for this, but we in this space here really should know better. That's our job, not teaching a set of facts to test in multiple choice questions. We have a much more complicated task. And I also think there are many reasons to change the sort of textbook and lecture model. This notion about teaching textbook facts. I think we've lost students' attention, and none of us are in the situation that's in the top corner up there with a whole bunch of students crowded into a classroom. But I do think we don't have people paying attention when we're just presenting facts in the front of the room. To quote Homer Simpson, it goes in one ear and out the other. There's a lot of data about student learning and how people process lecture material that sort of supports all that. So there are a lot of reasons to change this. So we need to get people's attention back. Maybe we bet on the wrong pedagogy, or it was easier or less expensive with the lecture and the textbook. But if you think about it, the lecture and the textbook are truly, truly the antithesis of what historians actually do. And, you know, this is what they do. We doubt the facts. We assess arguments. We try to make the picture bigger for people. We continuously ask, what else do you need to know to understand the situation? And we teach people to read between the lines. So I think that's the list of things that we should be thinking about. So I'm going to stop here, just because I think it's nice to give people a chance sort of in the middle of this to ask a few questions. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen briefly, maybe. Okay, so stop share. Okay, there it goes. I can see if anybody has any questions about things.
Yeah, so if you have any questions that have already come up or questions you arrived with, you can put them in the Q&A box here. We will take them when they appear. I'll help process them. Are there particular problems that you've encountered, or ways that you're hearing what Ann Hyde has been talking about and it doesn't sound right to you? Those are also welcome questions. So we have our first question here. Does inquiry-based learning line up with this approach to history courses?
Yes. I think there are all kinds of ways you can use inquiry-based learning. You can do it on a really, you know, just in kind of daily stuff that you do in class about, you know, how you manage, what is this a picture of? What are we looking at here? But there are kinds of much more project-y sorts of things that you can have students do that work really well with that model. But it is turning over who's in charge much more to students. But I think that it meshes well with all that. What are the core things, the sort of the Department of Education came out with? What's that called, Julia?
The Department of Education, but not the 3 C's, no?
Yeah, it is a 3 C's.
C3, is it the C3 framework?
C3 framework. So that is very much,
not the
inquiry-based learning fits into that. The way that they've revamped a lot of AP teaching fits into that. So, you know, I think that's definitely part of that.
And we have 2 very similar questions. So we must be onto something here. How do we avoid having an expression of doubt devolve into being cynical and untrusting of everything? How can we successfully scaffold this? And similarly, how do we balance encouraging doubt without giving momentum to the current cynicism that everything is fake news and expertise is not to be trusted?
I think it's a great question. And I think talking about how you choose the best solution, but it's always an imperfect answer. So it's not cynical. It's just saying we're always working towards a better answer. The data can be flawed. I mean, scientists do this all the time. They at some point they jump to a conclusion, and nobody gets cynical about that. But I think when, you know, these softer humanities and social science folks do it, there is cynicism. But I think this is a way to break down some of that cynicism, to sort of get under the hood about, you know, what this looks like, how much doubt and uncertainty there is. But I think saying, you know, there are better answers. Some answers are better than others, and here's why. and not just because I said so, which as a parent I still sometimes like to say, but it's not that effective, and that's what textbooks say, because I said so. So maybe that helps with little cynicism, but that is the poison right now, because we are so cynical about any information. Anybody else have any ideas about that?
And do you have an example of a case where maybe you were trying to scaffold that in the class? I know you have a fairly complex, I think you'll get into it a little bit later too, of how this actually works. But do you confront cynicism among your students, or are they sort of just, as you showed that picture last year, they were behind the screens and now they're just on the other end of the screen for the most part? Or do they actually share their cynicism with you?
They do. Why bother with this? Even to sort of, it happened in the past, so how can it possibly affect me now? So there's that level of cynicism. And I think that's pretty easy to sort of talk about all the ways that these things build on each other. And people do stand on all these kind of past decisions. And you can get students to talk about bad decisions they've made. They really enjoy doing that. So let's talk about bad decisions. And I can participate in that, about, when I chose poorly for breakfast or whatever. So what I would do the second time if I, wanted to come up with a better decision. So it's a sort of light-handed way to play with that, because we make decisions all the time based on imperfect data.
Okay, well, we haven't gotten any additional questions now. I think perhaps people will have more at the end.
Okay, so
wait, here's one more, sorry.
Okay.
Perhaps asking students about their own times might help. If we look at some current documents and imagine someone interpreting this time we're in hundreds of years from now, what might they say on the basis of those reports? Another question is, what criteria do we need to outline or co-develop with students to help them discern which answers, decisions, and interpretations are better? I think both of those kind of go together as well.
One of the things that we've been talking about in my class, just because it's so front and center, are the changing instructions we're getting about behavior on campus and sort of what that looks like and what people are supposed to do. So we did a little exercise where, so we did it in class. So some people did it on their computers and some people did it, but looking at the university instructions and sort of how they revised them. And I said, does that make you just not believe anything? And it didn't. They said, well, no, it seems like the universities learned something and they're actually getting better information. And I teased them about that because I said, you guys are supposed to be more cynical than that. But they liked the fact that something that seemed stupid now had a better explanation. So that's a present day document. Should we go back to me talking for a little while?
I think so.
Okay, so I'm going to try sharing the screen again. Okay. Okay. I need to get rid of Homer Simpson. Okay. Bye, Homer. Homer's gone. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about one of our signature moves in history, which we talk about all the time, which is called Contextualize the Past, and use a personal family story from my family to talk about its power at two different levels. And then I'll get back to my classroom. Okay, so when I was 11, my cousin and I were detailed to help my grandmother move. And she was moving from a third floor walk-up apartment to the one on the first floor. And this was downtown St. Louis, the summer of 1972. And it was a last bit of stuff. So we were supposed to get the stuff that was on the top of closet shelves. And we were really dragging our feet because it was hot. And we knew that the next step was going to be cleaning the apartment. So we started actually opening the boxes and looking at what was in those boxes. And we found these amazing documents that included our grandmother's report cards from Wellesley College in 1918. And so this isn't actually her report card, but this is a circa 1918 report card. But she got bad grades. And as 11-year-olds, we were thrilled. Wow, how was this possible? So we rushed downstairs with these report cards to show everyone, who gets an F in Shakespeare? How is this possible? And my grandmother, completely uncharacteristically, was furious, defensive, and she snapped at us about a year that had been very difficult. And then she wouldn't say a word more. So my cousin and I were like, oh, maybe she had a mysterious lover. Maybe there were pirates. We didn't have the context or the content knowledge to make sense of this. So, that's what I knew in 1972. But what I know now is completely different. And this is such a weirdly appropriate story right this minute, right? So it was 1918, the end of World War I, and Spanish flu was spreading through the dormitories. A quarter of her class, and remember they're all living in close quarters in college dorms, a quarter of her class died because she and all of her classmates volunteered to help sick soldiers and sailors in Boston, where Wellesley was located. So they were, serving as volunteers in hospitals and on ships. So a quarter of them died and another quarter went home and didn't return. And that reminds me of something else that Commissioner Keller said on Monday about, how much people lose in this moment if you don't finish college, if you go home, and obviously if you die from this epidemic disease. And there was a big discussion of this. And so, later I could look this up. I could look up the Wellesley College Bulletin that's online and sort of find out what they had to say about this. So I can look this up and I can contextualize it now. But my grandmother in the moment didn't or couldn't describe that context for her terrible report cards. And I really wish I'd known that larger story to help her tell it. So now I can flesh out that story, giving her, college experience meaning. And that's historical work that everybody can do if we help them see these bigger stories. So, everyone has the mysterious report card, family stories like this. But the thing we can do for them is make it bigger and make it more important. And I think that makes history matter really to everyone. So to take a little step back about this disciplinary thinking, that's kind of the way we use our expertise is part of that. And it is about taking a step back. It's giving it proper context, etc. So I think one of the ways, I think one of the questions that somebody brought up is, how do you fight this cynicism? And I think we have to talk about what expertise looks like in our discipline. And I think this is true for a lot of disciplines. So, how do we make sense of new information or a new way of seeing how an event unfolded. So this notion that experts revise and change their minds, that's what experts do. That's not being wishy-washy. What do you do when one story is different from somebody else's? So I think you have to take a step back and think about perspective. And this question about, truth or the right answer. Experts consider a range of possibilities, express some uncertainty about all of them, but then figure out how to make the best decision, pick the best answer, but express doubt about it. And that is what we do. So I think figuring out some teaching that showcases that uncertainty and how to manage it is challenging. So and again, this gets back to this value proposition. So I think Commissioner Keller might, I think in this particular moment, we can use our particular skills, empathy, and uncertainty to talk about race in the deeper context of the past. So because it's in the past, it's safer there, and we can kind of practice talking about these things. So, one of these things that's such a stumbling block for people right this minute, we really can help people talk about racism and white supremacy. So I think, that's important. And I'll say a little more about that in a minute. So let me get to what's happening at OU right now. We're back to Eeyore. So quoting Eeyore, it could be worse, not sure how, but it could be. So this is kind of where I was in the summer of 2020. I'm revamping a survey course. So I'm spinning up a new course for the first time. So to reframe it as opposed to, this is terrible and I didn't want to do it, it's an opportunity for me to redo this course right now as I struggle to make it matter to students, make it meaningful for people who are demanding that everybody's story be reflected in what we teach, and also to be ready at any second to take it all online. I didn't want to make it another horrible slog through US history. And I carried with me, all of this stuff about backward design, and I'll talk about that just a little bit. So it really puts the big things you want to teach and student learning outcomes first. It keeps you honest about what you're actually going to do in the course. I also carried Robert Bain's and Lyndall Calder's insistence on making your thinking explicit. Name what you're doing, practice it publicly, and make everybody do it. So this is showing doubt and uncertainty, but drawing conclusions from imperfect data, seeing where you and your family stand in the stream of time and stand in other people's shoes, which is another way of talking about empathy. So this list on the bottom, this is what I really wanted them to be able to do in this version of the US survey class. So again, at OU, like in Texas, this is a required course. Every single student has to take it. They can take, this is different than in Texas. They can take the first half or the second half. They only have to take one. And I've been teaching the second half for a while, and I was eager to go back to the first half. So this kind of gave me a chance to do this. But usually I have 250 students, but just because of the situation, I have 45 instead of 250. So that's the sort of context for all of this. But if I was honest, this is what I really wanted them to do. And then I actually think this is a moment we can do this. So I made teaching about race, learning about race and its history throughout the US past, one of my teaching outcomes. So it's, right there on the syllabus is something that students will be able to do. And this is challenging. So as we all know, I think students and teachers just shut down when they see this evidence of a racist past. It's hard to talk about. We're uncertain about how to do that, but I don't think we have that luxury anymore. I think given what's going on right this minute, we have an obligation. but we've got some tools to help us with this. So I think that's important as well. We can do some things that other disciplines can't. So we can take people into the past and look at race and racism at a distance. Students of color tend to see U.S. history courses as kind of a pack of racist lies. And this will help, saying that, you know, there is this racism that's built in from the beginning. And, you know, how to understand why young Black men are under fire. You need to go back to slave catchers and gun laws, which is easier to talk about than what happened last week. You can make the whole story of, you know, racism as it turns into sort of a powerful white supremacist nation after the Civil War. You can make it national if you add in lynchings of Mexican Americans, killings of Native people on reservations, and what happens when white supremacy is under threat in the 1950s and 1960s. And we have a way of explaining these things. And we should really be evangelists about how we can take a step back and to contextualize this. So that's kind of where I was operating as I was rethinking this course. Now, the next slide I have to apologize for, because it is the chart I made for myself to keep me honest about doing all this. So just again, a little context for the course. We teach this right now. There are 15 instructors who teach this course. We all teach the same exact assignments. There's the exact assignments for papers, exams, how people manage content and kind of how they package those things varies. But we have a very strict structure about what the assignments look like. So there was some stuff I couldn't mess with, which was probably just fine. Okay, so here's my, again, I apologize profusely. So this was my chart that I made about all this. And you can see, you know, so here are the course goals. This is how students are going to show that they can do X, Y, and Z. And this is how they're going to practice things in this third column over here. And now I'm really in the weeds about how, you know, each assignment is going to do X, Y, and Z. But, you know, here is the seeing the significance of race and slavery in US history. So I'm going to say I can tell they can do this when they make links back to it themselves in papers, exams, and on discussion boards. And, you know, again, because I'm afraid we might go online instantly, I'm using a lot of online discussion boards and document annotation exercises that are online. And then just another one that's really important to me. So I have all freshmen. There might be like one senior, but really, oops, keep doing that. They need to learn how to take notes, and they learn how to synthesize things, and they need to learn how to summarize. And we practice that a lot. So, you know, that's kind of embedded in all this. So, you know, you can see the sort of messy thing that and it gets much more giant because I, you know, tried to do it pretty much through the whole course. Okay, so I'm also stuck with the lecture, and I showed you that picture of me in the terrible, terrible room. So, you know, 40 students in the 300-person room. No, oh, this is, you know, not awesome. And we're all wearing masks. You know, it's challenging. So I'm stuck with the lecture, but I could take the lecture apart. So I've turned it into, you know, a contestable argument. Here's the evidence I'm presenting. It's a set of questions, and then it's a demonstration of how context works to shape all this. And sometimes, you know, so this issue about co-creating knowledge, showcase complete competing claims. And I tell them I'm going to do this. So, sometimes buried in things are a complete lie. And they always catch it, which is fascinating. Like, I don't think that's true. And then we talk about how they knew that wasn't true. So again, this is about, learning to trust your judgment and not be cynical about this stuff. So, this is complicated. And we talk about, why something couldn't be true. One of the things I'm doing in this class, and I'll show you an example of that, is I'm using clickers. So those are those classroom response things. And I'm really glad I did that this time because of the sort of weird online threat. So that has turned out to be a useful thing. So this is a fractured lecture. So it's not me presenting uncontestable knowledge. It's always about considering conflicting evidence, maybe by the end of the class, revising the narrative or claim. And, I always have this reminder from me at the bottom of my notes about stop talking and let them assess their skills. Can they summarize this? Can they come up with a better answer? We spend a lot of time talking about taking notes, and they get frustrated because they want the right answer and they don't want to write the wrong thing in their notes. So I talk about creating space in your notes for changing your mind, how you do that. So we spend a lot of time talking about this. So it's the first half of the survey. The topic we started with, was very early stuff. So, one question that comes up. So how do you think about what happened in New Mexico and Virginia with these first colonization efforts? So this is contestable in several different ways. So first of all, usually Virginia and New Mexico aren't compared at this moment, but this happens exactly at this time. So setting it up as a comparison and then asking all these questions about what was similar and what was different immediately sort of initiates some debate about this. It raises doubts. How could these things have turned out so differently? And there's some other things in there too. And so this is from my class on Monday, which was comparing these things. Okay, so here's how I start. So we always have kind of the daily puzzle, and it's almost always something visual. And people from New Mexico will certainly recognize this story. And a lot of people argue that students can't do this because they need more background or context. They'll make mistakes about what they're seeing. Well, yes, they will, but this is about teaching them to edit their mistakes and consider what they don't know. So, they see the statue. They have no idea who Oñate is at this point. They have no idea about the politics of this in New Mexico. There might be a kid or two who do, but pretty much this is foreign information. So immediately, everybody, of course, looks this up on their phone. And by the time we get to this, there's some people have some information about this. And they can see there's a debate about this. There's a big political debate everywhere about these particular statues. But this one has this, really interesting little detail because it kept having its foot removed. So, I tell this much more complicated story about, why people removed the foot, what actually happened in New Mexico in the 1590s to all those Pueblo warriors who had their feet cut off. So there's this story, and how we think about heroes in the present. So this is a good one to talk about in Oklahoma because it's distant and it's not fiercely political in the same way that it would be in New Mexico. But then I can talk about Confederate statues when we get to that, because we've talked about this before. So that's sort of how this goes. So again, after talking about the basics of what happened with, Oñate and his foot, in New Mexico, and I've introduced some uncertainty here. What don't we know? What do you need to know to understand what's going on in this picture? Why take down this statue? What's the deal with the guy in the foot? So, they're curious about all this stuff. So here's an example of a clicker question. And again, these are these classroom response devices. And I like them for two reasons. One is because they have something in their hand, they have to put their phones down. And also I can see what everybody thinks. I don't use it to quiz or test anyone. I just get a chance to see what people are thinking about things. Okay, so this is an image. So this is from the same lecture. So I've done this comparison of early Virginia and early New Mexico. And I'm just asking them to look at this image. What's going on in the picture? What can you say for certain? And I'm using clickers, but there'll be a split. People have different opinions about what they're seeing here. And they don't, the thing in brown where it says is a detailed John Smith's map, that's for you. But they just see the clicker question and this question about what's going on in the picture. So they're doing some fairly sophisticated analytical work here. They're looking really carefully at the image, what's in the background, who's doing what to whom. Is it threatening? Is it not threatening? So, usually this is one of these answers where the clicker responses are really split, and we can kind of talk through this. And in the end, they decide that all they can say is, there's someone who's bigger and smaller. It's clear who's who. But that's just an example of sort of how I can slow things down and introduce some debate into this. And I don't think it's cynical. It's saying we're all using our eyes, but the important thing is the more information you have, the more context you have, the more sophisticated of an analysis you can make of this. And they like that. By the end of even just this one lecture, they have enough information to say something pretty sophisticated about who's in the background, etc. So I think this is a way that, lecture really does have to be fallible, and students have to be doubting about this. So they're kind of questioning what's up there. Do I trust my own eyes about this? What do I actually see? So that's sort of where I think we are about this. So if uncertainty is history's signature pedagogy, what does that look like in the classroom? The Eeyore parts of me say, oh, this is way too hard. But I think naming our epistemology and developing a set of distinctive classroom practices to make it really clear the kind of intellectual and moral underpinnings of seeding doubt, reclaiming doubting Thomas is really what we do. The quote up here kind of spurs us on to think about what is it about what historians do that I could use in my classroom. But I really think that our discipline and our moment demand that we make this big value claim for history, that we can teach people to have much better judgment about things, which certainly seems like kind of an emergency to me right now. So that's the end of my spiel. The last slide has a huge list of resources and sources. So I'm not going to put that up on the screen. But you all are welcome to have that slide or that information. I think Julie's going to share that. But I'm happy to answer any questions. If I can figure out how to turn this off. Yes, okay. Stop share. Okay. I can see Julia again.
Hello. We do have one question already, and I encourage participants to put your questions in the Q&A section. and we'll get to them as much as we can. So this is something I think you did address briefly, but I think it bears repeating as well, if you could go into a little bit more detail about it. I like the idea of fractured lectures. It's great, but I often run into the problem of students not having the background, or they've not read the required text before class. So how do you handle this? I think some of what you've shown us is that you use images, it seems like, but I'm sure that's not the whole answer. So
I think when I started teaching, now a really long time ago, I assumed that one of the things I was doing was teaching against a story, that there was some story of American history that everyone knew because it was in your blood from birth and because you've been forced to take, 4th grade, 8th grade, 11th grade. And now I really assume that nobody knows anything, because either they don't know it or they don't remember it or they can't. So again, each little piece is about kind of one story I can tell. So, the example that was, I can tell the story of Oñate, and they know a little tiny bit because we've talked about conquistadors and what happened in New Spain and, Cortez. So they know a little tiny bit, but not much. And I can talk about John Smith and early Jamestown, but in the same way, but it's just a single story. And all we're trying to do is nest it in the really most basic background. I don't assign a textbook anymore. And most of my colleagues disagree with me entirely about this. Because nobody read it, and I got really tired of trying to police that. What I've been doing now is they read a lot of primary documents and a very few, it's not like scholarly articles, it's more like book chapters, but sort of little backgroundy pieces that I think are appropriate for beginning students, just to give them a little bit of context. But with the primary documents, I have an online thing where they go in and annotate those. And the assignment is, you have to make 6 annotations and respond to somebody else's. And they do a great job. And some of the questions that they have to answer have to do with context. And they'll look stuff up to do a good job on those annotation things. So we did the word queriamento, and we did Cortez's letter to King Charles. And so we'll get to some other things later. But then I can kind of see what they know and what they don't know. So I'm just trying to give them enough context to read those documents.
And we have a couple more questions. One is, you must have very rich class discussions. How do you approach tests or papers, i.e. structuring the assessments to reflect the kind of work that you all are doing in the class?
That is a good question. I don't know if we have rich class discussions right now, just because everyone really is wearing a mask, and it is so, I can't believe how much harder it is to do this with a mask on. But we try very hard, and I think they're doing a better job if I've had them do something online first, and then they feel comfortable shouting through their masks about stuff. But so they have their first mini exam tomorrow, and the mini exam is to take 2 things: a piece of the letter from King Charles that they haven't seen, and it's a piece that describes what Tenochtitlan actually looked like, and write a little essay about what they can pull from that. So it has to be less than 150 words. So, 2 paragraphs, and they have to have 2 quotes from the document. And then the other little essay question is comparing the relationship that Native people had in New Mexico with the relationship that Native people had in either New England or Virginia. And they read some documents about that. And they also read a little piece, by Daniel Richter. So it's the preface to his book, which is Facing East from Indian Country. But it's really straightforward. It makes a big picture argument about, why Native history matters. So they have to use that article as part of this, but it's 200 words, it's 3 paragraphs max, but that's the assessment. So there isn't much like content knowledge stuff, and they might have some when we get to the actual midterm as opposed to the mini exam. I've been using, instead of ID questions, these things that I call triads. So there are 3 IDs. So you could have like Cortez, Oñate, and Encomienda. And you have to identify all 3, but the issue is you have to link them. You have to tell me what they have to do with each other. So that's how I set up the assessment. And I feel okay. It's hard for them that's why I do the mini exam, which is a pain for me, but they get practice with how this is going to look. And then when they get to the real midterm, they're better at it.
And we have another reference to one of the previous questions about students' prior knowledge. I think it's a suggestion that you could ask the students to share with you about their prior knowledge. Do we share a common understanding of this topic? And what do they know, or what do they think they know about the subject? Do you do any of that kind of surveying?
A little bit, and I do it more when I teach the second half of the survey. I do that a lot more, and that's one of the things I think I've learned a lot about. In fact, last semester, about how to use the online forums for exactly that. So they're much more willing to kind of talk about that online, and I put them in groups of 10 in the big class. To kind of talk through some of those issues about what they know. But with the early stuff, I haven't done that yet. So probably when we get a little further in, I might. But I think that's a good idea.
Hi there, and maybe I can help you out here. I see that Julia has lost her connection. So we've got another question that came in about have you considered introducing media literacy concepts for analysis and crosswalking that to primary source analysis? So you do that in your classroom?
Yeah, I do that. I mean, this is terrible. So one of the reasons I wanted to go back to teaching the first half of the survey is I feel like I can do that with print images, photographs, paintings. I know how to do that. But so much of the media that comes out of the 20th and 21st century, I don't feel like I have the skills myself at this point. I mean, there are, amazing photographs that you can talk about, up into the present. And I think that's part of it. But, how to do it with, film, music, all the stuff that I think students are much better at than I am. I haven't done so much with, but I think that's a crucial idea. What do we do about social media? How do we teach literacy around that?
My apologies for disappearing. I guess my internet connection went out. So
yeah, things happen. Sam Weinberg has that kind of little, he's got a, I mean, he partly wrote a book about it, but he's got a whole thing about what students think they know about sourcing stuff that's on the internet. And I think it's an amazing exercise. I do that with graduate students because I think everybody needs that. Julia's not moving anymore.
Oh no, am I frozen again?
But I can hear you.
Oh, brother. So we had, it looked like did you answer a question about introducing media literacy concepts?
Yep, that was the last one I had.
All right. This is my phone now, so. We have another comment from Teresa Case. I tried the puzzle approach, and I think it's a great idea. My effort with this faltered because I do not consider that puzzles I think are interesting. They're not necessarily interesting for students. So do you have tricks for finding a good puzzle?
So now I really want to know which ones they didn't think were interesting. How do you find puzzles? I think if things that have some pretty obvious link to the present work better for me in introductory classes. Genuine historical puzzles. Well, I can think of a whole lot that didn't work. So one of the, okay, this is gruesome, but and only 19th century historians would really enjoy this, right? But there are all these jewelries made with your dead relative's hair that was, really popular in the 19th century. So I thought that would be a totally fascinating puzzle. And they weren't interested and they were kind of grossed out that anyone would ever do such a thing. I tried a similar thing with photographs of dead children. And again, they were like, why would anyone do this? And I think eventually I could walk them back from that about, how expensive photography was and, what you did about dead children. But I think that's hard. What we think as adults who've lived different lives about what's interesting is different. One really fascinating, we had a great discussion, and this was totally relevant because all of my students are being sent in and out of the quarantine dorm. So they're all freshmen. So we had this discussion about what they took with them when they got sent to quarantine. And, was it snacks or teddy bears or their favorite blanket or pictures? And then, we kind of moved back into, what somebody might take who was, leaving for the new world and had to decide, what would they have in their household in, the 1590s.
We don't have an open question right now, as far as I can tell, although I am back on my computer now.
Stressful, right?
You guys don't really need to see me, so it's not too stressful. But yes, it is. I can't imagine having my grades depend on the vicissitudes of my personal relationship with a variety of technologies. Doesn't seem like it should come down to that, does it?
But it does.
It does. Writing papers on your phone or writing papers longhand, taking pictures of your phone. Yeah, it's hard to imagine. Are there additional questions, the participants? Oh, here we have one. Very good. So this is more of a comment, I guess. Facing History on Ourselves has a cool new lesson on another statue, one of the Robert E. Lee statues in Richmond, Virginia, and how it has been recontextualized with the Black Lives Matter activists. It's called Confronting History, Transforming Monuments. And the AHA actually did a webinar a month or so ago on Confederate monuments, which was our best attended ever. I recommend it. And the recording is available. So I also recommend that.
So if at the end of my survey class, the only thing anybody learns is what I mean when I say we could recontextualize this, that's huge, right? That matters to me way more than the content knowledge. So showing, I mean, there are great examples of that. How do you think about a lynching museum? How do you think about, all of those? How do you retell that story so that it's fuller? There's a lot of stuff, new tribal museums have, worked at a lot of this stuff. So there's good examples of all that. But if students know that that's what they're doing, they're enriching context. So I want them to know that's what they're doing.
My colleague has posted the link to the AHA webinar in the chat. We also have an open question about Herbert Hoover, asking students, I think, to basically evaluate him. To what extent was he a victim of circumstances beyond his control? That's an example. And she says she tried to take the approach of turning the typical survey subjects and morphing that into a puzzle-centered approach. So maybe the better approach is to get micro, not macro, with puzzles from the beginning. That was a follow-up to her question about what examples do you use when you're trying to create these moments of, these epiphanies for the students that they can puzzle through.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's another, but I mean, again, naming that empathy move. What would it be like to stand in Hoover's shoes, literally? I think it's the Lyndon Baines Johnson Museum has this kind of virtual reality thing like that I thought was pretty cool. How would you, with this information, what kind of decision would you make? And it was about, Vietnam, about protests. So there is stuff out there like that.
And we are approaching 2:15 Central Time. But we do still have time if there is another question or somebody else wanted to share it. One other question we had, which I typed an answer to, was about whether or not you would be willing to share your reading list or your syllabus or anything like that. And if you have that last slide and you do want to show it to us, you can. We will also, people who have been registered for this event will also be emailed that.
Oh, that's true. If I show them, so they could take a picture of it, and that's easier than scrolling through the whole thing. Okay, so I'll just put that up there as kind of, that's a good point. Okay, so I'm gonna, I think, I'm getting better at this. Okay, so we got that one. Okay, again, tiny print, but you get the idea.
So here are some of the reading suggestions. And these are more, I think, background in designing the course rather than things that you actually use in the class. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I know some people have different relationships with their syllabi. Some people are required to share their syllabi online, I think. Other people are hesitant. Some people, there are different also intellectual property rights around syllabi. So even with all that,
the thing is, just because of, how our system works, I have a syllabus that I'm totally happy to share with anybody, but most of what actually goes on is all on Canvas. So I give them this little shell of a syllabus, but it kind of lays out the larger points, and it's very colorful. So but I'm happy to share that thing. But you know, the kind of daily in the weed stuff is all on Canvas.
And we have another question. Teresa Case mentions that previously, and I think it was actually 2 years ago, you discussed student resistance to your changes in the lecture format. What kinds of reception are you getting now, and have you determined a way to bring students on board? Do you keep it subtle and embedded, or do you intervene a lot to re-explain the concept?
I mean, one of the reasons I was willing to revise this course right now was if I thought if I did it right from the beginning and I wasn't defensive about it, this is just how we're going to approach it. And also, I mean, this time I have, freshmen and they're, pretty much totally willing to go along with you. If I teach it second semester, I'll have a different response, would be my guess about that. They know that what they're doing is harder. So, after the mini exam, there'll be some people who are, frustrated, but they get it, and they like class better when we're debating things, for sure.
But they notice that they have to work harder to do what is required.
The exams are harder, for sure.
And one of the questions that come up elsewhere, and then I will close this, is an issue about required writing in history courses. Many faculty feel sort of that they're holding the line on a kind of college literacy by embedding a lot of written assignments in their course. How do you think about that relationship between writing skills and the introductory history course?
I agree. I mean, I think it's our job. We have to do it, and we have to do it in the introductory course. It's hard. It takes a huge amount of time. Again, I have no choice about this because we all use the same assignments, but we have 2 papers, and one of the papers has a draft. So, and then there are kind of little chunks of things that they do to speed up to that. And one is a very limited comment on these 5 primary sources, and the other's more open, a more researchy paper.
And do you worry about the evaluation of individual student work in those assignments reflecting more about what their background was, their educational background before they got to campus, or do you feel like you're able to embed enough practice in the course that there aren't the equity issues that you might worry about?
Well, as grouchy as I have been about kind of the online piece of all this, I think that's really helped. So they do a lot of practice writing on the sort of online discussion boards that's very low stakes. And so they practice thesis statements there. So I think that helps, but the first formal paper is really hard for them.
Okay, well, we are ever so slightly past time, nothing to worry about. And I want to thank you, and I want to thank our participants for their questions and for their attention. Attention is in short supply these days, wherever you go. So we really appreciate the engagement that you have, and we also encourage any and all of you, if you have a chance, to sign up for our course discussions next week. Otherwise, we'll see you back online. There is this conference is a part of a larger series of AHA online professional development and teaching related programming, the online teaching forum. And we will have, we'll continue to have, we scheduled a number of months out, but we will continue to add more events to that throughout the year. So I definitely hope to see you guys online. Oh yeah, and the online teaching forum itself is a part of an even larger group of online experiences called Virtual AHA, which will also include user-produced content that might have otherwise been at the Seattle annual meeting in January. So we have a lot of nesting dolls here of virtual content. So thank you again, and we hope to see you guys in real life and online in the future. So thank you.